Marcus Aurelius once said, "The soul becomes dyed with the color of its thoughts." It's a powerful idea that what we think and what we allow into our mental space ultimately shapes who we become. But what happens when it's not just your thoughts, but the people around you who are slowly staining your soul? People who don't raise your spirit, but instead distort your clarity. The Stoics weren't just philosophers, they were warriors of the mind. And they warned us, over and over again, to be extremely careful about who we let into our inner circle. See, some people aren't just difficult, they're dangerous to your peace. They seem harmless at first, polite, charming, maybe even helpful. But over time they begin to influence how you think, feel, and act, not for your growth, but for their gain. These people erode your freedom, not by chains, but by confusion, by emotional fog. And if you're not aware of their patterns, you'll wake up one day wondering why you feel so distant from yourself. In this video, we're going to uncover the 3 types of people the Stoics warned us about, and more importantly, how to recognize and outsmart them. Whether it's a manipulator cloaked in kindness, a charmer with no depth, or someone who's always the victim and never at fault, Stoicism gives us tools to break their hold. Let's start reclaiming your peace by understanding the people who threaten it most. Type 1, the manipulator or the mind controller. You've met them before. They don't raise their voice. They don't slam doors or scream to get their way. Instead, they whisper. They smile. They play the long game. These are the people who pretend to be your ally while slowly bending your will to theirs. The Stoics knew their kind well, people who don't confront you, but corrode you. Epictetus said it clearly, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And manipulators, more than anyone else, target your ability to be your own master. Let's take a real-world example. Imagine a man named David. David's in his early 30s, works in a media agency, and for a while, he had a supervisor named Claire. Now, Claire wasn't overtly toxic. In fact, on the surface, she was supportive. She gave praise in meetings, complimented David's attention to detail, and even told higher-ups how valuable he was to the team. But behind closed doors, Claire's behavior changed. She'd constantly drop vague criticisms like, "I just don't feel you're as sharp lately," or "I'm a little disappointed, but it's okay, we'll fix it." Every compliment was loaded. Every correction felt like a guilt trip. Eventually, David began second-guessing himself. Not because he was underperforming, but because Claire made him feel like he was always one step from failure. That's how manipulators work, not by force, but by fog. They twist your perception until you hand them the keys to your self-worth. The Stoics warned us that one of the greatest threats to inner peace isn't war or politics. It's allowing someone else to control your judgment. When a manipulator gets in your head, they change how you see yourself. And that, to the Stoics, was the ultimate form of enslavement. Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts." A manipulator knows this, and so they paint your thoughts with their own brush, not with cruelty, but with precision. You'll notice manipulators often use subtle guilt tripping. They don't blame you directly. Instead, they frame everything as your failure to live up to their expectations. You cancel a lunch? Suddenly they're really hurt and disappointed, as if you broke a moral contract. You disagree with them. They act like you've betrayed some sacred trust. Their goal isn't to argue. Their goal is to make you feel like you are the unstable one, and once you start explaining yourself to them constantly, the trap is set. Another trick they use is twisting the truth. You'll say one thing, and they'll retell it back to you in a way that makes you sound irrational. "I never said that," you protest. But they're already rewriting the narrative. The Stoics would say, "Do not waste energy defending yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you." Epictetus emphasized the importance of holding fast to your impressions and testing whether your judgment was truly yours or someone else's imprint. Let's go back to David for a second. After months of this emotional erosion, David started working late every night. Not because he was told to, but because he was trying to earn back Claire's approval. He stopped giving ideas in meetings, stopped pushing boundaries. Why? Because he feared judgment more than he valued his own thinking. The soul had become stained, not by any external crisis, but by quiet, consistent psychological control. Stoicism tells us, you cannot live freely if your thoughts are constantly on trial in someone else's courtroom. So how do you outsmart a manipulator? The Stoics' first move is always this: stillness before reaction. When you feel triggered by someone's words, pause. Just pause. Don't defend. Don't explain. Don't overcorrect. Marcus Aurelius said, "If someone does wrong, it is because they are mistaken about what is good." In other words, don't personalize their manipulation. It's not about you. It's about their need to control. Stillness gives you power. When you don't immediately respond to their guilt trips or twisted logic, you break their rhythm. Manipulators feed off reactivity. Your silence is a statement. I see you. I'm not playing your game. Second, reaffirm boundaries using silence and detachment. This doesn't mean becoming cold or cruel. It means being firm. If someone consistently makes you feel wrong for making decisions, you must stop justifying yourself to them. Epictetus was clear. Don't explain your philosophy. Embody it. Don't argue your right to live on your own terms. Just live it. Pull away calmly. Let your absence speak. Third, and most important, stop seeking their approval. A manipulator thrives when you look to them for validation. The moment you stop needing their praise, their power begins to die. Think of it like a puppet show. The strings only move when you pull them from within. Cut the need to be liked by someone who's already proven they don't respect your boundaries. Reclaim your inner compass. It might feel cold at first. You might feel a twinge of guilt, like you're being too harsh. That's the manipulator's final weapon, emotional dependency. But the Stoics were brutally honest about this. Any peace built on someone else's permission is temporary. Real peace is self-built. Epictetus would say, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Ask yourself, are you adjusting your values to avoid upsetting this person? Are you dimming your voice so you don't trigger their disapproval? Are you performing emotional labor just to keep them happy? If the answer is yes, you're not in a relationship. You're in a role, and that role is draining your soul. There's an old parable from Roman times about a servant who lived to please his master. Every day he would anticipate his master's moods, tiptoe around his frustrations, and mold his personality to be agreeable. The master would praise him in public and privately scold him. One day, the servant asked the Stoic philosopher Musonius Rufus, "What more can I do to earn his full approval?" And the philosopher answered, "You're asking the wrong question. Ask instead, what part of yourself have you lost in trying?" Modern life isn't much different. We try to impress bosses, charm lovers, please peers, often by adjusting ourselves just enough to stay in favor. But the Stoics weren't interested in favor. They were interested in freedom. And freedom begins the moment you stop trading your authenticity for comfort. So the next time you feel caught in someone's emotional maze, step back. Return to stillness. Observe, but do not absorb. Recognize manipulation for what it is, a fear of not being able to control reality. Let them fear that, not you. Type 2, the pretender or the hollow charmer. Some people don't need to manipulate you to disarm you. All they need is a perfect smile, smooth words, and just enough eye contact to make you think they're the real deal. The pretender is the most socially skilled of all the toxic types. They're not overtly aggressive, and they're not blatantly dishonest. In fact, they often say all the right things, but behind their charm, there's nothing real, no depth, no consistency, no moral compass, just empty charisma, carefully crafted to make you lower your guard. And as Marcus Aurelius reminds us, the truth does not require a mask. Pretenders excel in first impressions. They know how to say the words you need to hear when you most need to hear them. They praise you in public, laugh at your jokes, make you feel seen. But it's not genuine recognition, it's emotional bait. And the hook is buried in flattery. They compliment to control. And if you look closely, you'll find a disturbing pattern. They always seem to be performing, like they're playing a role rather than revealing who they really are. Let me tell you about a man named Chris. Chris was an up-and-coming tech entrepreneur in Austin, Texas. He had just landed funding for his new startup and was building a team. That's when he met Jason, a charismatic consultant who had worked with several big-name founders. Jason seemed like a godsend. He praised Chris's vision, told him his leadership style was exactly what Silicon Valley needs right now, and talked endlessly about loyalty, trust, and long-term thinking. Within weeks, Jason became part of the inner circle. But Chris started to notice something strange. Jason was all talk, no follow-through. He'd hype up projects in meetings, make big promises, and then quietly disappear when deadlines approached. When called out, he'd deflect with charm. "Oh man, I've been juggling a dozen things for the team, but you know I got you." And Chris believed him, at first, because Jason made everyone feel like they were on the same winning team. That's what pretenders do best. They camouflage themselves in your values. They don't challenge you directly. They mirror your ambition, your ethics, your language. But over time, the inconsistencies begin to show. Their words say one thing, their actions say another, and by the time you notice, they've already collected what they wanted: your trust, your influence, your endorsement. The Stoics had a word for people like this: philodoxos, lovers of opinion, not lovers of truth. These are individuals who crave status more than substance, validation more than virtue. Seneca, the Roman Stoic and advisor to Nero, said it plainly: "No man can live a happy life, or even a supportable life, without the pursuit of truth." But pretenders don't pursue truth, they pursue admiration. And the more admiration they receive, the more convincing they become. You'll find them in your office, your friend group, even your family. People who offer intense compliments, but only when others are watching. People who name-drop their connections but avoid accountability. People who show up when success is in the air, but disappear the moment things get hard. They are not real allies. They are opportunists dressed in affection. So how do we outsmart them? First, trust patterns, not performances. The Stoics emphasize that human behavior is not about isolated acts, but about repeated character. If someone praises you once, that's noise. If someone consistently shows up, even when it's inconvenient, that's a signal. Seneca wrote, "Look to the soul, not the face." In other words, judge a person by what they do repeatedly, not how they present themselves once. Second, pay attention to how they treat people who can't benefit them. This is the pretender's greatest giveaway. Watch how they interact with a waiter, a junior colleague, or someone they have nothing to gain from. The pretender's charm is a switch, turned on when the cameras are rolling, turned off when it doesn't serve them. If they're dismissive, rude, or indifferent to others when no one's watching, that's the truth. Stoics believe that virtue is internal. It doesn't depend on an audience. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." The pretender is always arguing, always performing, never just being. Third, ask yourself, would this person praise me if there were no audience? If there were no gain, no return? If the answer is no, you've seen the mask. Now, see the person. Back to Chris and Jason. After nearly a year of tolerating Jason's empty charisma, Chris finally sat down and looked over the data. Every single project Jason had overseen had either stalled or failed, but Jason had never once taken responsibility. He was always managing something else, or handling high-level strategy. In truth, he had contributed nothing, except a sense of artificial harmony. When Chris confronted him, Jason deflected, smiled, and said, "I thought we were friends." That was the last red flag. Jason wasn't a friend. He was a parasite, feeding off perception. Chris let him go quietly. No drama, No accusations, just a clean boundary. And you know what happened? Productivity soared. People who had been quietly intimidated by Jason's charm felt free to speak up. And for the first time in a long time, Chris felt like the team was working from truth, not image. The Stoics teach us that charm without substance is a form of theft. It steals clarity, it steals time, and worst of all, it steals the attention that could have gone to people who actually deserve your trust. To live as a Stoic is to learn to see past appearances, not with cynicism, but with discernment. You don't need to confront every pretender in your life. Sometimes all you need to do is stop feeding the illusion. Stop rewarding charisma that lacks consistency. Stop letting smooth talk buy loyalty. The truth doesn't require a mask, and the people who belong in your life won't need one either. So next time someone walks in with silver words and golden smiles, pause. Ask yourself, does this person live their values when no one's watching? Or are they just good at saying the right things to the right people at the right time? The Stoics would tell you this: a person who builds their worth on performance will crumble the moment the lights go out. Build your relationships and your identity on something deeper. Type 3. The victim king, or the blame shifter. Some people make a mess. Others make you feel like it's your fault they spilled the paint. This is the domain of the victim king, the third type of person the Stoics warned us about. Unlike the manipulator who subtly guides your emotions, or the pretender who hides behind charm, the victim king wears their misery like a badge of honor. They are the perpetual underdog, the martyr in every story, the misunderstood soul who never gets a fair shot, not because of fate, but because the world and people like you are always against them. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Don't argue what a good man should be one." That's a subtle dig at people who prefer performance over substance, pity over responsibility. And the victim king is a master at that performance. Everything that goes wrong in their life has a villain, and it's never them. At first they may appear humble, even wounded in a way that elicits your compassion. They tell you about how others have betrayed them, how systems have failed them, how they were never given a real chance. And maybe you believe it, because we all know people who've suffered unfair blows. But soon, you start to notice a pattern. Everyone else is always the problem. Every critique is taken personally. Every setback is someone else's doing. And if you dare offer feedback or hold them accountable, you become the next villain in their tragedy. Let me introduce you to Sarah. She worked as a regional coordinator for a nonprofit in Colorado. She had a colleague named Melissa who was incredibly warm at first, always shared snacks, offered compliments, and liked to call everyone her work family. But over time, Melissa's behavior began to shift. She started missing deadlines, and when asked about them, she'd tear up. "I just have so much going on," she'd say, "and honestly, I don't feel supported here." The team rallied around her at first. They covered for her, took on extra tasks, and reassured her constantly. But the missed deadlines kept coming. So did the emotional breakdowns. Eventually, when Sarah, who was her direct team lead, gently pointed out some performance issues during a one-on-one, Melissa exploded. "You don't appreciate anything I do. I knew you never liked me." She stormed out in tears. The next day, HR received a complaint from Melissa alleging emotional hostility. The entire team was blindsided, and Sarah, who had acted professionally and kindly throughout, began to question herself. Did I go too far? Did I say something wrong? That's the power of the victim king. They don't just escape accountability, they make you feel guilty for even suggesting they be held to the same standard as everyone else. The Stoics had no patience for this kind of behavior. To them, the path to virtue was paved in responsibility, not in what happened to you, but how you responded to it. Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. In other words, pain and setbacks don't excuse us from being responsible adults. If anything, they test our ability to grow. So how do we outsmart the victim king? First and most important, stick to facts, not feelings. This doesn't mean being cold. It means being clear. When you address issues with someone who constantly plays the victim, anchor the conversation in observable reality. You missed the deadline, not, "You're unreliable." You said this yesterday, not, "You always twist things." Keep the discussion about behavior, not character. That's the Stoic way. Seneca taught that rational discourse is the only civilized tool we have for conflict. Emotions might rise, but the Stoic does not swim in them. Second, don't defend yourself excessively. This is a trap the victim king sets constantly. They provoke, distort, and then stand back as you scramble to explain yourself. Every time you do, they twist your words into new accusations. The more you defend, the more you look guilty. Don't play that game. The Stoic strategy here is restraint. Marcus Aurelius said, "You always own the option of having no opinion." In this case, that means you don't need to absorb the role they're projecting onto you. If you know your intentions were clear, let your actions speak. Third, refuse to join their guilt spiral. The victim king wants co-sufferers, not solutions. They'll bring you into their pain, not because they want to heal, but because they want someone else to carry the emotional weight. And if you don't comply, suddenly you're cold, uncaring, or too harsh. This is emotional manipulation under the banner of fragility. It looks soft, but it's corrosive. Stoicism teaches that your peace is your responsibility. You cannot outsource your integrity to someone else's narrative. Let them feel what they need to feel, but do not allow their emotions to determine your actions. Let's go back to Sarah. After the HR situation unfolded, she decided to do something very Stoic. She reviewed everything in writing, all her feedback to Melissa, all her calendar notes, her tone, her intentions. And she came to a difficult but liberating conclusion. She had done nothing wrong. She had spoken clearly, kindly, and with professionalism. The problem wasn't her delivery, it was Melissa's inability to take responsibility for her own work. With that clarity, Sarah made a decision: no more emotional management. She would be respectful, but she would not indulge emotional outbursts or guilt trips. She would not explain her leadership style to someone unwilling to be led. Within weeks, Melissa was transferred to another department. The team, now free from the emotional fog, began performing better than ever. Because when the victim king exits the stage, clarity returns. The Stoics believed that some people must be handled like a storm. You don't reason with the storm, you don't fix the storm, you secure your home and ride it out. Then you rebuild. The victim king is a storm disguised as a drizzle, soft at first, but eventually flooding your emotional space. Your job is to hold the line, not in anger, but in calm strength. There's one final trap to avoid here, and it's subtle. When you walk away from someone who constantly plays the victim, they may escalate. They may spread rumors. They may accuse you of being cruel. They may try to poison your image. Stoicism prepares you for this too. Epictetus said, "If evil be spoken of you and it be true, correct yourself. If it be a lie, laugh at it." In other words, don't engage in battles of reputation. Live in such a way that the truth eventually speaks for itself. Remember, you are not obligated to carry other people's emotional immaturity. Compassion does not require codependency. Kindness does not mean enabling, and peace does not mean silence in the face of manipulation. You are allowed and expected to guard your inner life from those who treat guilt like a weapon. So next time someone flips the script and makes you feel guilty for pointing out what's true, breathe, observe, step back. Let their emotions swirl, but don't get caught in the storm. The Stoic is not unfeeling, but they are untouchable. By now, you've seen the patterns: the manipulator, the pretender, the victim king. 3 distinct personality types that may seem different on the surface, but share one dangerous trait. They all distort reality to serve themselves, and if you're not careful, they don't just disrupt your external peace, they take root inside your mind. That's why the Stoics didn't just study these behaviors, they warned us about them. Because living a good life isn't just about cultivating virtue, it's about protecting it. The manipulator erodes your judgment. The pretender hijacks your trust, and the victim king invades your conscience. Left unchecked, they convince you to abandon your reason, doubt your instincts, and compromise your values. But once you see them clearly, you begin to reclaim something priceless, your sovereignty. And that is the heart of Stoicism, not control over others, but absolute command over yourself. Remember Epictetus's words, "No man is free who is not master of himself." That's not just a philosophical idea, it's a daily practice. Mastery means you don't need validation from the pretender. It means you don't explain yourself endlessly to the manipulator. It means you don't carry emotional weight that the victim king refuses to own. You operate from your principles, not their pressure. Marcus Aurelius reminds us, if someone can provoke you, they have power over you. And the Stoics' job is to take that power back, not by shouting, not by revenge, but by becoming emotionally unshakable. That doesn't mean you don't feel. It means your feelings don't govern your identity. These people may never change. But that was never your job. Your job is to notice, understand, and detach. Not with bitterness, but with clarity. You don't need to argue with a manipulator. You don't need to prove anything to a pretender. And you certainly don't need to fix someone committed to playing the victim. Your peace is your responsibility. And when you protect it, you lead by example. So the next time one of these personalities crosses your path, don't panic, don't react, and don't internalize. Instead, respond like a Stoic, with stillness, reason, and strength. Let them be who they are. You stay who you are. Because at the end of the day, Stoicism isn't about avoiding difficult people. It's about becoming someone they can't break. If you've met one of these three types in your own life, drop a comment below and say, "I've seen them." You'll be surprised how many others have too. If this video helped you recognize something real, like, subscribe, and share it with someone who could use a little clarity today. And remember, you don't have to control everything. You just have to master yourself.